Hello everybody, welcome back to another Conversations with Projektor. Today we start with the topic, my new audio setup. Before I go, you can contribute topics for this series on my Discord server. I have set up a new audio setup so that I have a little bit more control. As you can see, I upgraded my virtual mixer to a bigger version. So you can see I have a lot more stuff that I can tweak with, but really the only reason why I needed this is so that I have 3 virtual outputs. Otherwise, the other one that I had before would have been sufficient. So this is technically massive overkill, if not for the one feature that this has 3 virtual output tracks, as opposed to just 2. Because as you can see, I have 3 different setups for which tracks go into the different virtual outputs. So I have certain ones going into all 3 of them. I have certain ones going into just a few of them. I have certain ones that just go into like 1 of them. But I need all 3 of them for various different things. And this is just the easiest setup. What I used to do is I used to switch back and forth a lot between different setups, and that would sometimes mess up my recordings. Like I would have a setup for, say, a Zoom session with a student, and I would leave those settings in there, and then I would start to record a video, and then one of the audio things would go into a direction that I didn't want it to go into, or it would go into an input that I didn't want it to go into. And for example, my microphone track that I used to record my microphone would also have the music in there, and then I would need to redo the recording. So I'm hoping that with this setup now, I can eliminate that. I am very organized. You are far too organized. I do have to do that. You know, being a content creator, I have to work as efficiently as possible, and organization is a part of that. That's why I have notebooks and stuff like that, where I write stuff down, what I have to do during the day and stuff like that. Mixing and mastering rules. When you mix/master, do you follow strict rules or do you just do it by ear? You just do it by ear. Of course, when it comes to mixing, there are rules that you should follow. Like you shouldn't high pass your kick and bass because you're going to lose the cleanliness of your kick and bass. And you shouldn't like high pass your mix pass, you shouldn't high pass your master, that kind of stuff. Leave the high passes out of psytrance. Those are rules that you follow. Also, the rule that you should, the stuff that you should follow is that you should probably not clip, right? That is another rule that you follow. But at the end of the day, the decision that you make is purely made by ear. I guess it's a little bit of a strange question because your question implies that it's either one or the other, when that's not the case. You can mix by ear, completely by ear, while still following rules of mixing, which there are, right? If you have 19 sounds in a certain area, they cannot all be loud, right? That is just a rule of mixing, because you're out of space at that point. In regards to that though, the main thing is that when it comes to the listening, you're not like saying, okay, with a rule, it is like kick has to be this level, bass has to be that level, drums have to be that level, synth has to be that level. That is not really mixing. That is more data entry. At that point, like you're just putting volumes into the faders because you have a list of volumes that you need to put in there. But there are rules to what you can and cannot do within the liberty that you have when you're making decisions by ear. I think that is the best way to say it. I also hate rules. I don't. I think that they're necessary. I think that they're there to improve the way that you mix. Those rules are there for a reason, because when you break them, your mix is usually going to get worse. When I say usually, it is like 99.95% of the time, right? There might be one case where slightly clipping the master is a good thing, but generally speaking, you don't want to clip the master when you're exporting your final master. That's just a bad thing. So that is a rule, and following that rule will get you better mixes.
I mean rules like, you should always put this plugin on kick, EQ this and this, put this on master, remove this frequency, or the snare should always have this plugin on it, etc.
No, those rules I don't follow when it comes to mixing, but I do follow other rules. So there are rules involved. Using software modular synths.
Have you ever tried using a software modular synth for a track?
I have VZ-VRAC installed, but I never use it. When it comes to making music, what I'm looking for is quickly getting my ideas into the DAW. I guess Faceplant counts as a modular synth, like a modular synth. So in that case, yes, technically. But like modular synthesis, it takes a lot of time to actually get going because you need to build your whole patch with individual modules, right? And that's not what I'm looking for when I'm writing a track. You can imagine that a track like this that has 200 audio tracks and is not even half finished, it takes a while if you're spending a lot of time on one patch to get all of the tracks that you need to actually fill up a track like that. The faster I can get an idea into the DAW, the better it is. So modular synthesis doesn't really lend itself to that kind of workflow. So for that reason, no, I haven't used a modular synth from what I can remember outside of Faceplant. And then even in that case, I rarely use Faceplant because I really need to have an idea before I go into something like Faceplant. Normally, I just whip up Serum and just quickly make the patch that I'm looking for. I've gotten to the point with my sound design a long time ago, actually, that I just know how I can get close to the idea that I want to get in a very quick way. So yeah, no, modular synthesis, no, it's not for me. I've been using Bespoke with a prefab library to get faster outcomes. I love VCV Rec, but I understand the problem you have. Yeah, maybe I just need to look into it more. As I said, Faceplant is like a modular synth, and I use that from time to time. But again, with the workflow, when it comes to stuff like Serum, the speed that I have inside of Serum isn't really matched with any other synth. So 99% of the time, if I have an idea, it's just as easy for me to do it in Serum than anything else. If I have a specific idea that I know that I cannot achieve in Serum, like a specific FM setup or something like that, that I need maybe like 4 or 5 oscillators for, then of course you have to go with something else, and that is where Faceplant comes in. But other than that, I don't often use it. Just to be clear, Bespoke is a VST host, so you can host Serum inside of it just fine. Okay, but again, it's another step to a workflow that I don't really need, right? In the sense that I can host Serum in here just fine as well. There is a lot of Omnisphere in here, but you get the point. There's a Serum in here that I can just use whenever I wanted to, and that is for me the quickest way to get a sound in the DAW. That is all that matters to me. Because at the end of the day, what writing music is all about is quickly getting ideas into the DAW. Especially with psytrance being such a complex style of music, you don't really want any hindrance. Like, I don't want to load up a host so that I can load up the plugin that I was going to use. At that point, I just load up the plugin that I was going to use. I think I said it before in the stream, but once music becomes your job, you look at things in a very different perspective. Like, I'm not saying that you guys are, but I'm not messing around with audio trying to come up with cool things at this point. I'm just trying to write my track, the things that I have in my mind. And the faster that I can do that, the better it is for me, because then I'm spending less time working on my music, meaning that I can spend more time on other things that actually make me money, like working on products, working on videos, working on giving people lessons, working on mixing for other people, that kind of stuff. So for me, when I'm actually producing, I want to get as much work done as as quickly as possible, and anything that gets in the way of that, as good as that plugin host may be, or as good as its environment may be with the way that you can do modular stuff, and that, as I said, I don't know it, so I have no idea what it actually does. I just need to get ideas in the DAW. Like, as I said, I'm not messing around for an hour with sound trying to come up with something. I guess the best way to say it is I need results. I need, whenever I close the session, after days of work, if I have that time in the day that I can actually work on music, which often isn't actually the case. If I do have that little opportunity that I can do a few hours of actual work on a track, at the end of the project, I want to close out of the project saying like, yes, I've made an improvement, I've progressed the track, and not saying, oh, cool, I've added 2 sounds to a track that needs 200 sounds. Now it's going to take me another 70, 80 hours, whatever it is, to actually get the track finished. It already takes me a long time to finish tracks. I'd say like 40, 50 hours at least per track, and that's divided up over a very, very long time. For me, it's more beneficial that something works fast, not that something gives me a lot of possibilities, or that something is like a very nice modular environment, because as I said before, those things don't tend to work very quickly. The only problem is that the workflow isn't as controlled as the linear methodologies DAWs have. You can build linear automations, but it's a hassle. It's more meditative and open to accidents. Yeah, as I said, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm no longer in the position where I can just mess around with stuff. Like, my time at this point when it comes to production, with all of the other things that I do outside of like actually writing music, taking up so much time of my life, all of the time that I have to actually spend on writing music. Like even this is not technically what I would consider a studio session, because I'm streaming, right? I'm trying to be entertaining. I'm trying to have conversations with you guys. I'm trying to maybe explain some things to you guys. That is not really the kind of studio session that I would normally have. And in a normal studio session, I just want to go bam, bam, bam from idea to idea. And I don't want to wait around for accidents to happen. Sometimes they do happen. And sometimes whatever I was trying to accomplish doesn't work. Like, for example, some of the one-shots that we saw before, some of the sequences that I deleted before. But most of the time, I have something in my head, and then I just want to get it in the DAW. Another thing that I do is that I don't do a lot of my learning inside of actual productions. Of course, you always learn something, but when I'm actively trying to learn something, it's never in a production, it's always in like a session, which is like an empty project where I can just mess around. That is where, for me, the accidents happen, but that is not when I'm writing music. I separate out, I guess, the processes.
Melda's GUI.
Does Melda have the worst GUI of all time? No, it doesn't. It has one of the best GUIs of all time, because it's consistent between all of the plugins. Once again, that has to do with the speed of production. If you want to produce faster, having a plugin suite that has a universal like interface is very, very handy. The GUI may be consistent, but it needs improvement. It would sell way more if it did, I'm sure. What's wrong with it? I like it a lot. I like this stuff. It is not terribly like overly saturated or anything like that. It's not overly strange looking. I mean, it just looks modern. It has the same knobs everywhere. It has the same controls everywhere. To be honest, for me, it's exactly the way that I would want a GUI to be. At the end of the day, I'm not looking for aesthetics. I'm looking for functionality, right? Like if I go into Echo Boy, for example, here, there's a few things that I would probably change. Like I would have this text a lot brighter. This text over here as well, this text over here. I don't really care that it looks nice with the screws in here and that it has the wood on the edges and all of that stuff. To be honest, I would maybe even constrict the plugin window to just this. And of course, you want to keep the branding. I get that. But I would maybe even remove like the wooden box around it. Because at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. What matters is, again, at least for me, that you get your idea that you have into the track quickly. And that is what the GUI should enable you to do. It doesn't have to look good. It should be functional, I guess. At least that is for me. But everybody has a different opinion on that. That is okay. If an interface doesn't inspire you to get creative, then of course you're going to have issues with that. And that is something that you want to maybe look out for. But for me, that isn't a personal hindrance, because for one, I know that the tool is amazing whenever I'm using a Melda plugin. It is the most in-depth that you can get with any plugin, by far, I would say. Like, there's no reverb plugin that does what M-Turbo Reverb does. The amount of different options that you have, the amount of customability that you have. I never go in here, by the way, in the actual deep layers, deep into the reverb. Like here, you can edit individual early reflections if you want. You can write your late reflections algorithm if you want. You have different EQs and all of that stuff. I never really use that. But even in this space over here, you have so many options. You have all of your presets here. You have all of the different things in here. And to me, it's exactly as separated as I want it to be. Right? I just go in here. I choose which kind of character I'm looking for. I choose maybe the sub character from time to time. I audition a few of them. And then I just have the few different parameters that I may want to change exactly where I want them to be. And every individual reverb, I have 100 different reverb plugins built into one, always with the same controls. Like if I want to change the dry wet, I'm always looking here. And that is the thing that I actually value in an interface. It's not the way that it's like colored or the way that the knobs look. That stuff doesn't bother me whatsoever.
Melda's GUI needs more colors to separate sections on edit screen. It's a bit all the same at the moment.
But that similarity is, I think, its strong suit in that you kind of intuitively know exactly what something is. Like I know exactly that this is a knob, right? And I know exactly that these are sliders because they always look the same. It almost looks like a parameter dump, but I almost prefer that over some kind of crazy interface. What is that? Not even the CLA vocals, but there was like a vocal processor by Waves. Like, look at this. This is the interface. Like, this is not a joke. This is how it opens up. How are you able to identify anything like that? And then secondly, when it comes to waves, apart from all of the pushy advertisements that they have, every plugin is different. Every interface is different. If you learn one plugin, you have learned exactly one plugin in your massive bundle. If you run a Waves bundle, if you decide to get all of the plugins from Waves. Like, if you get this plugin over here and you learn all of its control sets, and then you move on to the next plugin, it's a completely new learning process. You cannot say like, oh, I know that this is a knob, I know that this is a button because I've already seen them in the other plugin that I've discovered. That is the case with Melda. I can open up any Melda plugin and I'm immediately able to identify all of the controls in it, all of the schemes in it, how it works, you know, because it's always looking the same. And there's like separation in there. Yeah, you could argue maybe it needs a little bit more color separation between one or the other. But at the end of the day, it's the interface that is just presenting you the controls in a way that doesn't change from interface to interface. So you want everything to also be uniform in that way.
Butch Vig loves the steampunk look.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to work with that kind of plugin. I don't care how good it sounds. That's the kind of plugin that I would just never work with. What I'm looking for in a plugin or any tool when it comes to music, as I said, I think I said it before, is just speed. And one of the things that I've learned having Melda plugins as my daily driver is that it's not so much the speed of daily use, but the speed of learning new things in the plugin that really improves with this kind of uniform, flat interface. And yes, some people may say it like, this is too flat, this is not separated enough. But you always know, like, anytime that there's a section, the title is going to be on the top left, the dialogue or the manual is going to be on the top right. And that is true for everything. You have like bypass over here, right next to the manual. You'll always be able to find that. And that is one of the things that you're gaining from having an interface that is uniform. And there are some sacrifices that need to be made for that. And one of those is that, yes, the interface is going to look a little bit flat. It's not going to look as playful, but it's more functional than aesthetically pleasing. And I guess that is just what I value in plugins.
Monitoring sub bass.
Do you use headphones to monitor sub bass? Not really, no. When it comes to bass, over 12 years of production, I've learned that I don't necessarily need to hear it the clearest possible to exactly hear what I'm doing. With the use of analyzers and just the experience that I have, I guess I can get away with not having a sub bass anymore, like a dedicated sub like I used to have with my speakers. No, that dedicated sub isn't compatible with the monitors that I have now. Otherwise, of course, I would still be using that one. It's like specific to the set of speakers that I used to have. At some point, I am going to get a sub again, especially when I'm in the new place. Everything monitor-wise and acoustics-wise and all of that stuff, I have put that on hold. A, because I need to save up money, and B, because I'm leaving this apartment again. So in a few months, I'll be gone here, and it doesn't really make sense for me to make any changes to my setup right now in terms of acoustics, in terms of, like, as I said, the sub bass before. Even the monitors, at the end of the day, I wanted to have them, but purchasing them the time that I did, as opposed to in September, when I'm moving to the new place where I actually have a room that I can make a nice, like, symmetrical studio so that I can put my desk in the right spot and all of that, the stuff that you actually need to do to get some good acoustics. All of that's, like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for me to make changes now. I'm going to pause all of that up until September, and then I'm going to look at everything that I can do within the budget that I will have at that point, and then I'll have to see.
From loop to song.
Anyways, how do you go from a cool loop to a song and generate a workflow? I don't work in loops. I have no idea how to come out of a loop because I never write in loops. I immediately dive into a project expecting to write a song. I quickly make my kick and bass. I either start immediately writing with the ideas that I have, like the musical ideas, all of the synths and the one-shots and the sequences and the pads, the atmospheres, the vocals, whatever idea that I have. I immediately start with that. Maybe I'll spend some time working on the drums, and then I immediately start writing in a structure. So if I know that I'm going to be working on a drop, what I'll quite quickly do is move my kick and bass over here. Like, I don't have my kick and bass over here and working on 9 different ideas and then move it over once I'm like, okay, this loop is fire, I'm going to work on that. I immediately go into that idea that whatever I'm working on is going to be like a track. That way I never have that moment in my workflow where I'm like, oh, now I have to turn this single thing into a long thing. Because at the end of the day, what you can see is that there is no single thing in my track, right? You can see with all of the sequences that every sequence has its own spot and it's almost unique to that spot. Like, this thing happens over here, it never happens again. This thing happens over here, never again. This thing happens over here, never again. This thing happens over here, never again. And for most of the other elements, that is true. As you can see, I sometimes do recycle ideas because they tend to fit in multiple places. But 99% of the time, if I have an idea, it just stays in there. So for me to even work in loops doesn't really make sense, because when it comes to the loop, if I make a loop that is this long to write out this idea, then I might just as well write out the idea itself. Right? It doesn't really make sense to write this in a loop, because if the loop is going to be this long to encapsulate this idea, then this is just going to be the idea. I might as well write it as if it's already a track. I guess to summarize, don't write loops, write tracks. I could probably word that better in the video, and I might. I'm actually going to write this down in my notebook. Don't write loops, write music. Right, sure is different from hard/uplifting trance. Yeah, to be honest, I don't know how you do it in there. I believe with other genres, you're basically writing a melody and then your drop is going to be that melody, and then you write your break, and for the second drop it is the same idea, the same melody. So in that case, you could write a loop for the drop and then place that loop in the spaces where you want to have the drops, and then write the breaks and the intro and all of the other stuff in between that you need to. But even then, if I were to personally write a track like that, I would still probably not do it like that, if that makes sense. Because usually I create a fire melody and get stuck. Yeah, to me that doesn't happen, because when I create that fire melody, it is already in the place where it needs to be in the track. It's already, like, I think in this thing, I started with this idea here. Like, I wrote this specifically here. I didn't go in here, wrote it out as a 8 bar or 4 bar or 16 bar loop, right? This is 16 bars. I didn't write it out as a 16 bar loop over here and then drag it over here and then start writing the track about it or around it. It was written right here. It is the way that you see it was the way that I initially put this idea into the project. And that is true for all of the elements. I didn't come up with this idea over here or this idea over here or these ideas over here in a different part of the project and then drag them into the place where they needed to be. I wrote them there. That's where I wanted them. So naturally my project is, there aren't any loops in there. Sometimes you see a producer that has a project where they're working on a song like this and then they have a massive amount of extra stuff at the end of the project, right? Their project is twice the length as the actual song, and there's just random ideas thrown in there. I don't like to write that way, because that just generates a non-musical mess. I would describe it the best. It's a mess of ideas that isn't really a song, and you cannot expect, I guess, to write a song if half of your project is designed to not be a song. At least that is the way that I would look at that. So for me, I'm always going into the project and into the production with the intent of writing a song, not loops. So I never bother writing actual loops. So in that case, it's hard for me to say like how to get out of that, because I never put myself in that situation.
How to add elements to the track.
Also, how do you decide on what to add or remove to make a song interesting? Is that by feel? Yes. Yeah, the whole idea has to come from you. Like, you have to, I guess, resonate with the idea that you're writing. So if something doesn't fit in the track from a feeling wise, then I just delete it. That's what I did before in this project, when I said like, okay, this element over here, I'm not really feeling the way that this element is playing right now. So I just deleted part of the element, rewrote a different part into a different idea, and then I got the thing that we have now. There isn't really, I don't think there's really like any theory to that. There isn't really a way for me to easily describe into words how that workflow goes. It is just something that throughout time, if you're producing, you catch up on, okay, this feels good, this doesn't feel good. It's one of those things that you're naturally improving. In the same way that if you're training yourself properly, like I always suggest people do when I talk about mixing, I always suggest that people listen to half an hour of professionally mixed music before they go into anything related to music creation, especially if you're going into a mixing session, of course. Then I would even suggest doing like an hour worth of it, and then just sitting there, not even maybe actively listening to it, but you can do things on the side while you have a playlist up and running, but just to tune your ears, to get your ears in the right spot before you go into the session. That is what I would do in terms of just preparing for it. If you do that for long enough, you're eventually going to have like an intuitive feel of what the music is going to sound like, or what the music should sound like. And in the same way, you're going to naturally, if you write 100 tracks, you're naturally by the 100th track are going to get a feel for which element fits where in a track and which element doesn't, just from a writing level, right? Not even leaving the mixing side out of the equation and stuff like that. There's things that you can do wrong, in the sense that over here, for example, we already have a main element and it's already full. Right, this part of the track is full. I cannot add another element in here because there's no space for that. Right, I cannot go in here and add another acid line or a big FM synth because there's just literally no space for that in the mix. Your ears wouldn't be able to distinguish all of the elements of the track and make sense of what the track is doing. If you throw in another element and you mix it as a main element, for example, then that doesn't work. So there are things that you can like technically say, like where can I add an element, where can I remove an element. I cannot really add another big FM lead to this segment of the track, for example. So there's like a few things that you can learn, but it's mostly based on feel. And that is a feeling that you learn over time, which is not the way that you would learn from like a tutorial where I can just say, okay, if you have this, 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 and this, then you cannot do this, or you can do that. I cannot really, I cannot give you the feeling that you need to have to make those decisions by just like going like this or explaining it in a tutorial or something like that. It is something that you have to build up yourself through experience, in the same way that you have to build up your mixing ear. No matter how many tutorials you watch, if you never listen to music, you won't be able to mix music. That's just the way that it is. And if you don't know what professionally mixed music sounds like on your system, you're never going to be able to mix professionally sounding music, because you don't know what your target is. You don't know what you're aiming for. And you need to train your ears in order to get to something like that. It is art after all. Yeah, kind of. That's not really the way that I mean it. It's really the training aspect that I want to highlight. Not so much that you're using feel as in an artistic feel, but a feel as in an experience feel. In that you have enough experience to judge where elements fit in the track. And that is something that just comes from a little bit from listening to reference material as well, listening to reference tracks and doing the whole exercise that I said before of just listening to music on your system. But the main way that you're learning like element placement and where stuff can be added to a track, that stuff all comes from just doing it and failing a bunch of times, and then you're going to get there. But that's a long process. That is a process that can easily take 12 years like it took for me. But it can take longer as well if you really wanted to. It's not writing music isn't easy, so you need to train yourself to be able to do that. You cannot jump in and just start writing music and expect it to sound as good as the music that you hear on the radio or in your favorite DJ set or whatever. It doesn't work like that. You have to train yourself. You have to prepare yourself with the experience to be able to do that. That's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know if you did by leaving a like and make sure that you're subscribed. Another way to support the channel is by watching some more of my content, so I'll leave 2 videos up on the screen for you to choose from. So just pick one and enjoy, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.